So performance appraisal, this is a study in some schools, and performance appraisal was introduced as a substitute for what used to be a small salary increase, salary progression increase. So that was replaced by performance appraisal. And this study is actually looking at what the perceptions of the educators are in that regard. So I gave you basically the problem. So that's a problem around which we're going to look at the satisfaction, dissatisfaction of the educators and whether it fits in with the thinking of the Department of Education. Right, so this is set out as the aim, looking at the performance appraisal and looking at the challenges. So there was some theory done around this study, and there's some description of how we look at performance appraisal and the issue of how it fits in with the thinking of the South African education system by the management of the ministry. So some of the aspects that it looks at is the quantity of the output, quality of the output, the timelines, and the present at work and the cooperativeness of the teachers in the system. Let's see if you can get me to the next slide there.
The slides are shared by you, so you can actually navigate.
Okay, right. I think I gave you the idea of the purpose of the study is to look at performance appraisal acceptance by the educators and whether the dynamics of the interpretation of it and the application by the ministry is fully understood by the educators. Some aspects is communication and the standards, the goals. We'll go on with the next slide and we'll show you that. Right, and I think you are aware that performance appraisal is generally based on a period of time, and the time generally is a year, and in some cases, 6 months, just to have an accumulative idea of all the performance for the year is. So that's the documents and the data that's collected. Communication is one of the most important aspects, and I think we'll see later that it becomes a weakness in the system, and it's supposed to have been fully fledged and not a speedy system to be introduced. And this, unfortunately, is what the study is going to highlight, amongst other things. Sorry, I'm rushing. I just got a few minutes before the load shedding, and I'm going to be switched off. But as I told you, there's a composition of elements that goes into preparing a performance and designing performance appraisal system, which is standards, goals. We'll see a few more later. Then we have aspects of relevance, sensitivity, reliability, acceptability, and practicality. Right, relevance, we can see that it must fit with the organization's objectives and the job objectives. Sensitivity is with regard to understanding whether the acceptance level by the educators is same as what the education department requires. Generally, you find that it's a difficult aspect to measure because it's between two parties. One is the person that is the team that's being used to evaluate, and the other is the educator. And the tools that are used sometimes are not very scientifically engineered. And the word that's used for that is it becomes judgmental. So what happens is they use a score that is determined over the period of time, but because the events are known only for the recent period, and that becomes the tool which they use, and we use the term halo effect for that, because instead of doing all the good things for the whole year, they just take a few of the recent past events. I'm just going to go through some things that I know very quickly. This is a qualitative study. It was about 150 educators from a few schools, which was selected in the region. As we said, it's a Durban South region. And those that, it was a good response rate from those schools. The data was collected using the SPSS system and a questionnaire. But what was the findings is that the educators were dissatisfied with the way the system was implemented. In other words, you find that the thinking of the department was not what the educators felt they were achieving with the performance appraisal system that was introduced for them. And you will see later, it is merely determined to replace the salary progression. So what happens is that when the appraisal is done, it's unfortunate that it's not very scientific. And you find that wherever there is individuals involved, they just try to do it in a way where somebody gets the increment by getting a good performance. And I just read another article or in the paper, that the minister at that state said, how could the school be doing so bad when all the performance is very good? And that was a very testing question. So that emerges, or that shows us, and it emerges that the performance was not being done correctly. Right, so we got some recommendations. Yeah, we said that these aspects must be viewed again by the education department, and they need to change some of the ways and means in which this is done. And normally to clear up the communication, because there is serious impressions that the communication is not appropriate to get a good system in place. It needs to improve drastically. So there may be training required on both sides, those that are working with the system and those that are being trained, being appraised. So they made some suggestions about the way training can go. And if that can be introduced, maybe it will improve the system. So this was a study, as we said, about the perceptions. And we said that the management system needs to be clearly understood to be implemented correctly. And the dissatisfaction is great. I didn't put the percentages. I didn't want to make it too complicated. And the Department of Education in South Africa needs to address this. Although I did this very quick because it's going to get switched off, and my power, we got load shedding, unfortunately, which just comes in suddenly from time to time in South Africa. So I'm just going to allow you, if you have any questions, if I can answer them. I know this was a very arid presentation, but I know it cannot be fitted in at any other stage. So therefore, I thank Professor Datta to allow me to present today. Thank you.